I love this stuff, and have been doing it on and off in various capacities all my life. We started out, I think the first talk I ever gave here was a talk on the history of local barns. And then we followed that up with a talk on timber carpentry and timber conversion. We start with a round log and proceeded to hew it into a square log with a broad axe, and then came inside and did some of the basic joinery that a carpenter would use to put up a frame building back in the 16th, 17th, 18th, early 19th century. And that covered basically the rough woodworking, the carpentry work. And I don't remember which order these came in. Somewhere along the way I did a thing on blacksmithing, where we demonstrated how the blacksmith made the hardware for all of this stuff, everything from nails to hinges and whatever, and we didn't demonstrate it all, but the basic processes were demonstrated. And the other talk that preceded this was the joiner's craft. And these colonial crafts were specialized. They were not in the hinterland, out in the boonies, some guy did it all. In the more populated areas, the specialties were really quite well defined. So in reasonably populated areas, in towns, the carpenter would erect the frame, probably clad it, roof it, and then it would be turned over to a trade called the joiner. The joiner made the windows and the doors. He did the interior and the exterior trim. He did the paneling inside and the wainscoting and any built-in bookcases and so on and so forth. But basically it was stuff that was fixed to the building. And it's the last trade that I feel competent to talk about, so this is probably the last time you'll have to put up with me. Is the cabinet maker's trade. The cabinet maker is the guy who made the furniture. And here again, it was quite often specialized. Chair making was often a separate entity, particularly things like ladder back chairs with woven hickory split seats, or Windsor chairs. These were often a trade all by its lonesome. General cabinet making is the guy who made formal chairs, beds, tables, and carcasses. And carcasses was by far and away his biggest output. Think about the furniture in your house, a bookcase. Well, think about the furniture in my house. I have a bookcase, okay? It's a 5-sided box stood on end with some shelves in it. I have a wood box, which is just that, a box. I have a linen press in my dining room. That's another 5-sided box with 5 more boxes called drawers stuffed inside it. A hutch, that's a box stacked on top of a box with some doors on the front and some shelves inside. Etc. It goes on and on and on.
Coffins?
Coffins, certainly. Blanket chests, yeah, all of that stuff, definitely. Carcasses. And the thing that sets the carpenter or the cabinet maker apart from the joiner is that the cabinet maker depended on dovetail joints for a lot of what he did. That's the premier way to hold these things together before we had really good adhesives that we have now. And then up until World War II, we didn't have an adhesive that would stand up to the weather. It would stand up to getting wet. So the joiner never used adhesives at all in anything he did. Doors and windows were all put together with mortise and tenons and pegged. The carpenter used glue, lots of it, but it was all animal hide glue. If it got too hot, it would fail, because it melts. And if it got wet, it would fail. It melts. And nonetheless, it was quite adequate for furniture, and a lot of furniture was made with it, and it worked quite well. It's still a glue of choice, particularly in restoration trades, because it's reversible. When you're doing restoration work or when you're doing conservation work, the rule number 1 is don't do anything. Somebody else can't come through and reverse and undo. You're not so smart. You might have screwed up. If it's the bed George Washington slept on, it might be nice to get rid of your screw-up someday. We don't know everything. We don't know a lot about how these people worked at all. We're slowly discovering some of it, but there's still lots and lots of questions. But anyway, so what I decided to do tonight, because carcasses are such a major portion of the cabinet maker's output, is I'm going to try and make you a little 5-sided box, very similar to one of these. Dovetailed corners. This is a plywood bottom, but we're going to use a solid wood bottom because they didn't have plywood in the 18th century, early 19th century. But we're going to do something very similar to this. Now, this was before there were any woodworking machines. Yeah, nobody heard about planers or table saws or anything like that. So, we got to start. Sawmills were around. There were plenty of sawmills. Sawmills were here probably by 1650. They came, well, not here, but in this country, on this side of the Atlantic. And when this area was settled, well, here it's Watkins and Flint Purchase. A little west it's Phelps and Gorham Purchase. But these land speculators, when they bought a piece of land like this, they'd give you a free farmstead if you had a mill, either a grist mill or a sawmill established within 3 or 4 years. That was part of the advertisement, because that made the whole plot that much more attractive to others. So sawmills were around. So the stuff you got from the, to start with, was a board, like that. I've started to work on this one a little bit, just because I'd like to get through at least cutting it one set of dovetails before we quit tonight. But we're gonna get our stock out of this rough sawn stuff, and we're gonna do it with hand tools. So, in order to get started, we will, first thing we do when you're starting is you want to get one side flat. You want it to be flat this way, no twist. And that you do with a plane. Plane is called a plane because it makes planes. And this is hard work, but it's not that onerous. Feel free to ask questions. Anytime. I'm going to spend a lot of time pushing planes tonight. So.
How accurate were the first sawmills?
How accurate?
If you wanted, they cut inch boards.
Yeah, they cut inch boards.
What was the basic?
Inch plus or minus a quarter inch, probably.
Quarter inch.
Yeah. The first ones would be reciprocating. We didn't really get into circular saws. Everybody says the Shakers invented circular saws. I don't buy it. The British Admiralty was experimenting with circular sawn timber before the Revolutionary War. We didn't get into circular saws because circular saws require high-speed machinery. They've got to turn fast. And we didn't have the skills to produce rotating machinery that would rotate that fast.
I've seen a variety of pictures of different kinds of planes. Mm-hmm. Do you work with different kinds of planes?
Oh, yes. I could ask my wife. At last count, I had something like 350 planes. Now, some of them are duplicates, but there's a lot of variety in there. And I'm going to, well, I got 1, 2, 3, 4 planes tonight that are different purposes that I will use before I'm done.
How are planes designated?
How are planes designated?
Yeah, I mean, you have a black plane and, like, what do you call this when you're using now?
This is a smoother.
Okay.
It's called a Razzie smoother because the handle is down here instead of up here.
Do you have planes?
Planes? What's a plane?
That's what I wanted to know.
What are some of these big ones called, you know?
That's a joiner. Okay, the basic category are bench planes, which are smoother, which is like this. This is a coffin-sided smoother. jack plane, sometimes a four-plane, and a joiner. Now, a smoother is typically 8 to maybe 12 inches. A jack plane is 12 to 15 or 16 inches. A four-plane would be 16 to around 22, and a joiner would be, 22 to 28 sort of size. And the widths would vary as well. They go on from there. That is the basic set of planes. Those are called bench planes. Then there are all sorts of specialty planes. They do a very specific and special job. This is a plow plane. Okay, it's designed to do one job and one job only, and that's to plow a groove, the width of the iron, and the irons are interchangeable, so you can change the width of the groove by changing the iron, a set distance from the edge of a piece, and it's got a depth stop in it, so you can go as deep as you need. You can adjust it to stop when you get there. This is called a moving philoster. It's a form of a rabbet plane. Its job is simply to plow, to cut a step in the edge of a board. We'll use both of these tonight before we're done. This is called a moving philoster because it's got a fence on it that you can move back and forth to adjust to the width of the rabbet. Many of them don't have the fence, and you would set the width of the rabbet by tacking a guide strip on the board with a couple of nails and then plane to that. Use that as a guide for your plane. So they come in all sorts of varieties, and then there's a whole class of planes called molders. And those are the ones that make different profiles for molding. Okay, the simple ones are called hollows and rounds or beaters. Hollows and rounds do the opposite of what they're called. A hollow makes a convex curved surface, and a round makes a concave curved surface. It's interesting, hollows and rounds are the only planes who are not called by the shape they produce, but by the shape they are. All the others are named by the shape they produce. And beaters produce a bead. Some of them will produce a bead with a fence so that's right along the edge of a board. You see this in beadboard paneling a lot. You will see it around the edges of drawers sometimes. A center beater will plow a bead in the middle of a board or wherever you want. Those are the simple molders. More complex molders do Grecian ogies and Roman ogies and crown moldings. Crown molding ones sometimes are 6-8 inches wide. You need an assistant to pull on a rope to push the thing through the wood. That, in a nutshell, that's planes. I mean, I've got books on planes that are, well, there's one up here. There's one up here that you can look at afterwards. List hundreds and hundreds of planes. So, anyway, let's get this flat, because the next thing we got to do is to make it the right thickness. I'm going to make this box with slightly thicker ends than its sides. The reason for that is I want to use what's called half-blind dovetails to put it together, and I'll explain why in a few minutes. So, the goal here was to make a flat surface, and it looks pretty good. A little light under the edges, but not bad. I'm not going to worry too much about that. So now, we're going to use 3/4 inch, and I took the liberty of doing this on the ends earlier today, so I didn't have to bore you with watching me do the same thing over and over and over again. That's the piece we're going to cut it in half and make 2 ends for our box out of that. But here I want to get this down to 1/2 inch. Today, running through a thickness planer a couple of times, there you are. No such thing then. Then you had apprentices. If you were an affluent shop, and I expect apprentices did a lot of this stuff.
How did they deal with drying out the timbers, or the boards?
They're probably mostly air dried.
Just air dried?
Just air dried, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
Because if you take them inside,
Well, Yeah, let me talk a little bit about that. Just, what I'm gonna do while I'm talking is I want a 1/2 inch board. So I'm gonna take and set my this marking gauge to a 1/2 inch or thereabouts. And the dimension's not all that critical, you know. We're not building, this is not rocket science, and, you know, what I really care about is things fit together. I don't really care whether the side is, you know, 7/16 or 9/16 or a 1/2 inch. But when I'm done, I'd like it all fit together. Well, I digress again, and this is going to take all night. There's an old saying that, you know, a carpenter works to the nearest 1/8 of an inch, a cabinet maker works to the nearest 64th, and a boat builder works to the nearest boat. And the reason is that everything on a boat is fitted to what's already there. It doesn't make any difference what the dimension is. Nobody cares. What they care is there aren't any gaps between the boards. That's what keeps the boat afloat. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to mark a line around here. A 1/2 inch from the surface that I just finished planing. Go all the way around the board. And I can see already we're not going to finish this box tonight. But I will not keep you from the goodies back there. So at 8 o'clock, feel free to get up and go collect some goodies. And I will continue to work. Somebody brings me some goodies, of course. And we'll eventually get there. But
did they make any attempt to make some kind of a kiln?
not much. I've not seen much about wood drying in kilns until
Now the cabinet maker, it
late
made a difference to
1800s.
the cabinet maker.
Huh?
It made a difference to the cabinet maker.
Well, this is where I was headed before I digressed into that other little story. They worked in different conditions. They didn't have centrally heated houses. So there wasn't that much difference between
Oh,
indoors
that's
and
right.
outdoors. Okay? There's an article in one of the early issues of Fine Woodworking by a guy from West Virginia who made his, I don't know if he made his living at it. I guess he made his living at it. Anyway, he was very well known for reproducing old museum piece furniture. Doing an absolutely beautiful job. And when they interviewed him, he said to somebody that if I ever had a chance to go and touch some of the stuff made by these old guys, I'd never wash my hands again. Well, as a result of this interview, they got him into one of the Met or one of the museums. And he said, I've touched this stuff, and I wash my hands. They made it look good where it needed to look good. But they worried not about cross-grain construction, they worried not about cross-grain glue blocks, they didn't worry about any of the stuff we worry about today. Because they weren't fighting centrally heated houses where the humidity is 90 in the summer and 25 in the winter. Yeah, so they had it a lot easier.
But some of that old stuff now is so dear to collectors that they pay millions of dollars for something that's not really
Yeah.
very impressive.
Yes, but you need to, you know, it needs to be stored in a, if it's not going to self-destruct, it needs to be stored in a, you know, very well-controlled environment. Okay, so anyway, I got a lot of wood to take off here. Cut that down to about half its size. And this is called a scrub plane, and it's designed specifically for doing that sort of work. It's got a very convex shaped blade. It takes almost 1/8 of an inch to pass. Okay, it's usually used cross grain or diagonal to the grain, and it'll take a lot of wood off in a hurry. This is the only metal plane I brought tonight. For a long time, I didn't think any American manufacturer ever made one of these things other than metal. I found recently that Alan Sullins, in his book on woodworking planes, has a picture of one that was made by Herman Chapin's Union Factory in New Hartford. And I went to one of my catalogs and found, yes, indeed, way back in the back, under miscellaneous planes, they list a scrub plane. It's both the one in Selham's picture and the one in Chapin's catalog have what's called a horn on them. And a horn on a wooden plane is a sort of a sensuous looking horn that sticks up out in front that you can conveniently hook your thumb around. That's very characteristic of continental European, German, Dutch, French.
Is there a desirable wood for the old wood planes? Made out of wood.
Beech
Beech is undesirable,
beech was the wood that was preferred,
and we got a lot of it.
and we had lots of it. It was nice, close-grained gray stuff. It was hard enough that it wore well, and it was easy to work. So most American planes after 1700 were made out of beech. Prior to 1700, I think they were probably whatever was available. A lot of birch, particularly in southern New England. You can see this removes wood in a hurry. Doesn't leave a very pretty surface, but it removes wood in a hurry.
Now, the sawmills didn't produce much half-inch wood, I assume.
I doubt they produced any half-inch. Even today, you can't buy half-inch wood at the local mill. 4/4 is this.
That's it.
That's it.
Now, when I was in high school, we had some kind of a shop class, and that was rather thin.
Well, somebody has resawn it or resurfaced it. I mean, specialty shops, you can buy it from Woodcraft, I suppose, $15 a board foot.
When did bandsaws come along?
1840s, 1850s, along with all the rest of that machinery. Same time that farms mechanized with reapers and so on and so forth. In 1790, Patrick Slater got off the packet from New York to Providence. Introduced himself to his future employer, Moses Brown. He brought with him in his head the plans for weaving machinery, spinning machinery. And started the Industrial Revolution in this country.
That was against the law in England, right?
It was against the law for him to export that from England, but he did, and he worked for Mr. Brown, and he built Slater's Mill, which is the first spinning mill in this country. That was in 1790. Before that, we didn't have machines, period. Water wheels, driving sawmills, but, fancy rotating machinery was not something that was readily or commonly available.
I can't imagine doing that with hardwoods like
Well,
hickory and
if
so
you're
forth.
going to do it with hardwoods, what you do is you work it green until you're close, and then dry it.
I would imagine it would be, but I've
Yeah.
never done that.
Green oak is no more difficult to work than pine. The only problem with working green oak is if you're using iron tools, your hands turn black. That's because the iron salt of tannic acid, which oak is rich in, is a permanganate, which is black. That's why when you set a glass of water down on an oak surface, if there's been iron on there anywhere along the way, you'll get a black ring. And it's the same process. rid of it by bleaching it with oxalic acid. And we're getting there. In fact, we're getting close enough. Now, it's time to make it clear when we get there. And the way I do that is I've scribed my line all the way around. And I'll take a plane and I'll plane a chamfer down to my line. By doing that, I can see where the line is from on top. Whereas I'm looking down here from here, the only line I can see is maybe the one on this end and the one on this side. And the first rule of any kind of cabinet making, or any kind of actual woodworking of any kind, is you never try to cut or plane or work to a line that you can't see. Pretty simple. But how many times have you cut a board in half trying to cut to a line on the far side of it?
I know you did, Sheriff. I know you did.
Well, I can see through.
You built your cabin that way.
You know? That's not bad. Again here. There. That's pretty good. Now I can see where I need to stop up on top. It's like old Milt, I knew I was going to shed this before I was done. I'm surprised actually that I managed to keep it on this long. This work is work. There's no question about it. But it's not that onerous. You know, we have so stigmatized sweat in our society that so many commercials for antiperspirants and deodorants and so on and so forth. People think it's a sin to sweat.
Dick, what did they use to keep their blades sharp?
Pardon?
What did they use to keep their blades sharp?
It was not long before they had found, in this country, before they had found repositories of natural stone that were particularly good. There's some in Vermont. Slate is wonderful for final sharpening. And some slates are better than others, of course. The naviculites in Arkansas were world-renowned for a long time.
Was there sort of a trade in sharpening stones?
Pardon?
Was there sort of a trade in sharpening stones? No,
I don't know.
bringing them from New England?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I've never looked into it particularly. I wouldn't be surprised if the trade and everything else. You know, I mean, the Indians used to trade obsidian from Yellowstone on the Erie Canal up here. So, I wouldn't be at all surprised if there was a trade. I've read accounts of cabinet makers, other artisans in town making a trip to a particularly well-known stone quarry to quarry sharpening stones. There. We're down fairly close now, and it's not very pretty, but that's what the other planes are for.
What did you take off, how much depth-wise?
How much did I take off? I went from 1 inch to a 1/2 inch, so I took off a 1/2 inch.
Half an inch.
Half an inch off of there, 1/2 inch off of here.
Well, we had some pretty good diameter trees around here.
Yes, they did. In fact,
Right now, we think it's a big deal to buy a board 24 inches wide. How do they look at those boards? Like if you gotta work on them,
yep. It's interesting. Cabinet makers, of course, like nice wide boards because they can make nice wide single sides. Carpenters didn't. If you got to hew a 8x8 out of a tree, you really don't want that tree to be any more than about 13 or 14 inches at the small end. Otherwise, you got a lot of extra wood to hew off. So,
well, they tend to warp a bit too, or cup.
pardon?
The wide ones tend to cup a bit. They don't stay flat.
That's true. Although,
Takes longer to dry them out.
no, the wider ones, because the inch thickness is what controls the dry rate more than the width.
Do you work to the middle of the line?
No, I don't work. If
You
this
leave-
had to fit into something, I would be very
you leave the
precise
line.
about it. This, I really don't care. I'd like it to be uniform, but as I said to begin with, I really don't care what the dimension is. It doesn't make any difference if it's 7/16 or 9/16 or 1/2 inch. What I really would like is for it to be reasonably uniform and flat. There. One last pass here.
Seems like a lot of work.
What does it take me? 20 minutes
With a lot of time.
with a lot of talk? Which is fine, that's what I'm here for. I'll pass that around and see.
At 50 cents a day, that's not too bad.
Yeah, there you go. But don't forget, even as late as 1915, these things were sold for $1.50 a dozen.
Oh,
A dozen.
Yeah.
What do they go for now?
Depends where you find them. You can buy a fancy German one for about $150, wooden plane. You can go to your local auction or flea market and buy one that, in various states of repair or disrepair, for anything from $5 to $50. If you're going to buy one, things you want to look for, you probably won't find. That's much too wide a mouth. If I were using this seriously for fine work, I'd have inlaid a piece to close the mouth up. This is This is where I think Americans got their scrub planes. They took old smoothers that had worn to the point where the mouth was too wide to be a good smoother, and they just ground a crown on the blade and used it as a smoother, or as a scrub plane. And that's why you don't find Americans making very many scrub planes. I suspect that the one in Chapin's catalog was imported and restamped by Chapin. I don't know that, so I won't want to anybody quote me on that,
You can see this?
but that is my guess. Okay, now the next thing we got to do is we're going to put a bottom in this box. And the way I'm going to hold the bottom in is by putting a groove all the way around the inside that the bottom will then fit into. So this is the two end pieces that we're going to cut in half and make two ends out of later. But it's easier to put the groove in while they're still together. I guarantee that it's the same distance on both pieces, and we'll do that piece at the same time. It's going around the room now. And that's what this plane is for. This is a plow plane. You see it's got a little narrow iron in it. The irons usually came in sets of 8, starting from sometimes as narrow as 1/8 of an inch, and certainly 1/4 to an inch by 1/8 or 1/16. And I want to put this in, about 1/4 of an inch from the bottom and about 1/2 inch. So the bottom's about 1/2 inch up, and so I've preset the thing so I don't have to monkey with it here. And I want to set the depth gauge to be about 1/4 inch, and well, actually, yeah, that's 1/4 inch. That's probably pretty good. We'll do 1/4 inch.
What's the date on the folding?
Rule? I don't know, probably late 1800s. It's not. It's a fairly fancy one, a lot of brass,
Yeah.
boxwood.
I've got 3 or 4 of those things. You should see my file.
So, I've set the fence, and we're just gonna put a hole down on here, I guess.
You get to sweep this out.
No. I see that. Unless I need wood shavings.
Yeah.
Oh, come on. One of the problems here is that my bench is not flat. My bench is generally used for timber framing, and it's been stored outdoors, and having a flat bench is a big advantage for this kind of stuff. The other problem
What
is
kind of wood is your bench?
oak.
Red oak.
Red oak, yeah. It's just a piece of oak that was left over from a timber framing job. But I can't get that thing to hold either, so maybe we're gonna have to approach this some other way. See if this one works better. I've used these on here a lot before, so I'm a little surprised that it doesn't. It's not got it. Yeah, let's see if we can. Nope.
You want to clamp it?
Yeah, we're gonna have to, but that's not gonna work.
This is the wrong clamp?
Yep, I'm gonna have to resort to a modern clamp. And that's not gonna be easy either. Because I have to have a place to. You just do that repeatedly until you get to the depth. That stop is set.
Pull it back up a little.
Roy Underwood,
Yeah, I know who he is, I have a couple of his
he's
books.
written a couple of books, and
Yeah. I know who he is, I have a couple of his books. I just don't have the wherewithal to watch him. That way I have a nice even surface to guide the fence on the plow. But he's branched out into other stuff as well. Lee Valley, Leonard Lee's company in Ontario, under the trade name of Veritas, makes really fine planes and really fine two sides actually, and two ends, because we're going to cut them in half. And then I'm going to, for the moment, at least skip the bottom and lay out the dovetails, because I'm just about out of time already. Which, anyway,
Okay, how did they make a square?
how did they make a square?
Yeah.
Trial and error.
Ah,
First of all, you got to make a straight edge. Okay, you can do that with 3 straight edges, and you just keep working them until they'll all mate. All 3 pieces will mate. The 3 edges will mate. You make 2 of them, but that can be done if one's convex and the other's concave. But then when you bring the 3rd one up, it will mate maybe with one of them, but not with both. And you just keep working 3 of them until you can bring them all together and see no light between them. Okay, that gives you a straight edge.
yeah.
Now you got a straight edge. Now you make a square by using your straight edge. Okay, and you adjust the square to as close as you can get, and you mark a line. And then you turn it over and mark a line. And you'll see if there's an error, it'll be double the error.
Okay.
And you just work it with a file or whatever until you get there. That's how I made this guy. Okay, that one's marked, so we might as well cut it.
Do you want that to fall?
Huh?
Do you want that to fall?
Which?
The piece you're gonna cut off?
Okay. Happy? Fell in with it. You know, if I were making these things with the rounded ends, I probably wouldn't saw those. Either draw a knife or an axe and finish it up with plane. There. Now we have 2 ends for them. On the side of the box, it won't show on the end. And the reason I did that is if I did through dovetails, came all the way through both ways, then either the side or the end little groove that the bottom's gonna sit in shows. Okay? If I do a half blind dovetail, that's gonna sit in there like that, and it won't show. This will sit in. So, the alternative, and that's the way I did these things, is to make the groove stopped. Don't run either on the bottom or on the side. You don't run the groove all the way to the end, and then it won't show. That's easy to do on a router table. It's a lot harder to do with a plow plane, because I don't have any place for the skate for the plow plane to run out. So, dovetails. They're beautiful joints. They're very strong joints, which is why they're in such great favor. They're not a perfect joint. There are places where, for engineering reasons, you don't want to use them. Well, you don't find many of them in chairs. They don't make a good joint for holding a chair together. They make a great joint for holding a box together. Anyway, what I've done is I've set my gauge, homemade cutting gauge. It's got a blade in it rather than a scratch point, so it slices the wood parts. And I've set it to the thickness of the side of my box. Actually, I'm going to set it so it's just slightly more than the thickness of the side of my box. And then I can clean things up at the end and have the tails be absolutely flush with the side of the box. And you take that and you mark on the ends. I need to mark on 3 sides. I don't need to mark this because I'm not going to go that far through. I'm only going to go partway through. And I'm going to put the pins on the ends, which I have to do if I'm making half-line dovetails. From the bottom, that gets this first tail above the groove that the bottom is going to fit in, so I don't have the dovetails and the bottom joinery interfering with each other. And so from the bottom edge of this thing, I'm going to come up 3/4 of an inch, like so. Just put a mark there. Same at the other end. Oh, I didn't mark that in. From the bottom edge, I'm going to come up 3/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to drop back to a 1/2 inch for the throat. And again, the dimension is not critical. What's critical is that it be the same. Dovetails at almost a 45-degree angle. You're inviting the sharp corner to split off. So it's better that it be a fairly slim angle, but enough so that you generate good interference, so it can't be pulled out. And 6:1 is adequate in hardwoods. Most of the router bits that are made for cutting dovetails are, I think, 14 degrees, which is more like 5:1. We'll take this and we'll, where did I put on the sides line up? Just like that. And then I'm going to clamp them to my bench. Not come up close if you'd like to see it. And I got to mark
Yeah, feel free to walk up if you want.
a square. Yeah, please feel free to get up and arthritis, you were lucky and he did it. It's not that onerous. It's work.
Oh, wait a minute, no,
I'm sweating up here. I don't mind. Our society thinks it's a bad thing. Actually, in the summer when it's hot, I feel better.
Now, who is that?
You done with me here? I scribed one from the other. Yeah. No, I cut the tail first and scribe the tail. Other people, some people do it the other way. Some people will do it all by
Yeah, it
measure.
was hard work, but it was.
I don't tend to be super careful when I'm cutting the tail. If I'm off a little bit, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, gotta make sure you get the meat and
I mean, the big bugaboo here is
the last for the year. Yeah.
Well, it's not worth it. Once we're trying to explain what you're doing, there's no question.
Oh, and that fresh air. Yeah.
If this was something fine.
Well, yesterday I did transplanting. I had a holding bed out back from my plants. So I'm trying to keep